Okay. Hi, and welcome to the Jonny Random Show, where we don't always take ourselves serious, but we do take the topic serious. Yeah, it was pretty good. Just wrote that. So today we have a couple guests, and the topic is going to be cancel culture. But first of all, in my top right, well, I'm not sure where you are on the screen, but we have my brother, and he is a unprofessional actor and writer. Then we have in one of the other boxes, my father, who is a retired trainer and also teacher, and my brother-in-law, who is a husband, father, theologian, and aspiring songwriter. So today's topic, actually, let them say something about themselves, bring themselves in. So yeah, let's go back to Matt. Forgot. Jump past our introductions. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day to be alive, which is always true.
Yes,
that's the nice thing
indeed.
about it. So,
yes. So now when I introduce you, now people know which box to look at. Yes, Matt. So, and then my dad, Mark.
Hello. Looking forward to this conversation and some other conversations we're going to have in the future.
Canceled. No.
Yeah.
All right.
Future
and Paul
is canceled.
Yes. And Paul, who we do not have a video for, just the audio, is somewhere on your screen. You can sound off.
Bottom right.
No, the sound is on. I'll turn it off when I'm done talking. But yeah, hey, how y'all doing?
All right, great. So like I said, today's topic is cancel culture. I'm just going to go on Google here and read what it says cancel culture is. Cancel culture or call-out culture is a modern form of ostracism in which someone is thrust out of social or professional circles, whether it be online, social media, or in person. The expression cancel culture has mostly negative connotations and is used in debates on free speech and censorship. So it's a very connotation in most circles that I run in. And so today we're not going to have a whole lot of positive things to say about cancel culture. But we do want to talk about it because I think it's very important that we talk about it because it is impacting so many people in and around us. So today, let's start with just sort of not necessarily the history, but how this affects someone that you know or something that you've seen. And go ahead, Dad, if you'll take it off first, just bring us in with some thoughts on cancel culture.
Oh, just, when we talk about cancel culture, there may be more areas than this. There's at least three that stand out. And there are people that right now are behaving badly, or they have a wrong belief or something like that the majority believes is wrong. And it's generally not known that they act this way, that they're doing these things. And when it becomes known, the person is canceled. Second group is people who somewhere in their past did something. It might be something that at the time might be, considered wrong, or something that was fine to do. It just was done in the past, and majority society values have changed. And so what was commonly done in the past, is not something that's acceptable now. And, one of those things might be, blackface. You're imitating a black actor or something, and you put on blackface and you imitate them, or however blackface is done. I don't know really that much about it, but it's not part of my history, the people I hang out with. But I wouldn't have seen anything wrong with it in the past, just to be honest. But now it's become something that's seen as offensive and shouldn't have ever been done, type thing. So
it seems so prevalent right now. I mean, everybody walks around on eggshells now because there's this perception of how am I going to be taken? Am I going to be canceled? It spills over into in how you interact with people at work in a way that you maybe wouldn't have thought about how you're talking. And I think some of that comes from, at least in my estimation, is everything today is recorded. Our thoughts are instantaneously put online. There's just sort of hyper awareness that my words go out into the world and could come back at me. And that didn't necessarily always was the case where that would always come back at you. So now you have a situation where, like you're saying, somebody in the past, their emails may have come out. John Gruden or whatever, the Raiders football coach, emails came out, and from something that he had said, and and so that leads me into a question. We generally speaking think that it's bad. Cancel culture, just bad. Universally, we can all agree that it is bad. But are there any situations where it might be good that you can think of? Kind of throw a curveball at you here. Or anybody, if anybody else wants to take it, doesn't have to be a.
I was actually thinking about that before. So the thing about cancel culture, first of all, is it's a culture around canceling things, but to a lesser extent, it's really the difference between, first of all, it's the difference between having a calm wind or a hurricane. Calm winds are good. They are productive. They drive windmills. They do all types of things. You need them for ships. Well, we used to need them for ships. But a hurricane, nobody needs that. It's a destructive force. It's too much of a good thing. And cancel culture is kind of like that. So the idea behind cancel culture is that if you say something or do something to someone that is wrong, that there will be repercussions. Part of the problem is that we can't, as a culture, decide on what is wrong. That's another factor of it. But beyond that, also, the reaction is out of proportion. So there's an issue of determining what should be canceled, and there's an issue about how cancel should be. Because one of the biggest things that we've seen with cancel culture is literally the destruction of people's livelihoods over something that was many times fairly innocuous. A single statement can make you anathema and destroy your entire career. And even it's bad enough if, let's say, you're an actor and then you can't ever get acting jobs again. But as a prominent actor who can't get acting jobs, I don't know that too many companies are willing to hire you either. Those repercussions just keep rolling. So at that point, you've almost, for a stray Twitter comment, traded your career for your basically a criminal record. You've got an unofficial criminal record at that point, which is another problem, but that's not what we're talking about today.
I think it goes back to due process. You're judged. You could apologize, or you could disagree with it. Either way, but even if you apologize, it's like there's no restorative end to it. It's like you're done. You deserve what you get, and you deserve worse. And that's the problem with it. Is again, goes back to what Matt said. The
due measure.
The measure. Yeah.
Well, in the way we're talking about it, it almost seems like what we see in politics in large way with, the sort of the deplorables comment, right? If you're deplorable, you're like beyond redemption, right? So these people are beyond redemption. And I even see that on the other way. I mean, I'm not going to just pick on everybody. It's like the 47% that will just never vote for you because, they're on welfare or whatever, and they're just not going to vote for you. It's just writing off those people, and as if that's okay to do, as like less than human, And so I think that spills over in other ways. And I just saw a little correlation there that I never thought about before saying that. But
I will say that what you're talking about is a matter of how the person does it. But as far as actually good uses of cancel canceling something. Every day we get a lot of messages, and we have plausibility structures, and we decide what is true and what's not, and we react based on that. So it's not inappropriate for somebody to get on Twitter and say, hey, this is wrong. Let me put my voice to that. The problem is when people generally start to pick up on that, it snowballs, and then you get a lot of people who don't have any real morality to base how to treat another person. That kindness is not a factor of their life. And then that's when you get what behavior that is typically known as trolling or harassment behavior that then attaches to it. So it's a compound effect, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I have a grievance against this person because of something that they did. It's just now the fact is that one little tweet that you get, if you say it well enough, can get picked up by 400,000 other people who all then start liking this thing. It snowballs, and then it picks up all the trolls.
Well, the question I would have is it ever right to do this publicly? I mean, if you disagree with somebody, and you make it public, there's an issue there. But then again, if you don't know the person, it's difficult to ever persuade that person or have a conversation with that person. And
especially not a,
Well, I was gonna say that's where it gets really tricky in the day and age we're in. And I really want to do an episode on talking about the sort of postmodern era into like the digital age. I want to talk about that transition because I think that ties back to what we're talking about. To me, is if you praise in public, scold in private. That saying, and a lot of us live by in management. You don't call somebody out in public. That's going to demoralize them, and it's going to cause more problems. But you praise in public because you want that to be seen. Well, we have, like you're saying, with the tweet, you put it up there, and people you don't know are coming at you, and it's such a part of how we operate to just throw things out there on the internet and put ourselves out there like that. And then, when people, you could always find something to attack somebody on, always.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was the third group that I didn't get to, was you have a segment of society that disagrees with you. And, it's one person that's trying to have this amount of weight, and very few people could stand against it. I mean, there's been a few people who've cut back to somebody who tweeted about them and said, I don't care what you think, because they are, they can take the storm, but very few people can, take that storm. And I think what will probably end cancel culture is that, the saying, those that live by the sword will die by the sword. There's enough people now that used to cancel other people that are getting canceled and going like, whoa, wait a minute, that it may just fizzle out. That would be self-destruct.
I figured out how to make a fortune on this, though. All we need is to invent shoes that have like a print of eggshells on them, and everybody that wears those shoes basically says, I'm canceling cancel culture. I'm tired of walking on eggshells. Like, that would be how you merchandise this.
There we go. We got a product already.
Exactly.
Is this like real eggs, or are we talking about like an egg carton? Like,
I was thinking something like maybe like Keds with eggshell prints on it.
Oh, okay.
So like canvas shoes.
Yeah.
Left Paul out because cold here.
Maybe. Is it cold there? I didn't think it was cold there.
You could use eggshell shoes around the house in marriage too, Multiple uses.
I got it.
Go ahead, Paul.
No comments.
I think, John Mark, you're setting yourself up for home canceling.
Yeah.
But
canceled on our first episode.
Dang. All right.
I mean, I fully expect that. We are talking about cancel culture.
Yeah. So I see cancel culture in the wider culture. I mostly look at that inside of the context of the church. And you have, and I think, Matt, you made a good distinction. There's a difference between cancel culture and, well, wait a minute, this really isn't acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of any number of evangelical leaders, either in churches or in parachurch organizations, that have said some things, and sometimes it's just wow, that had to have gone better in their head than it did when they said it.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another segment of that population that that it's just part of who they are, part of their ministry, what have you, and they will say these things that are very controversial and a lot of times out of place, or there'll be attitudes and actions that they'll hold that have no place in the church, or at least they shouldn't have a place in the church anymore. So when we talk about cancel culture, I think it was mentioned already that this idea of groupthink and group judgment is what this individual said that they're getting all kinds of heat for. Should they be getting heat for it or not? And if they shouldn't, what's going on here? And if they should, how do we, at least inside the church, how do we deal with that? Because at some level, there has to be mercy. And one of my biggest problems with cancel culture is that there is no mercy, none whatsoever. You get canceled, your career's over. You hold ideas or you say things that some people think are controversial and others aren't, and half your income's gone. And so it's, I guess my biggest point here at the moment is there's no mercy in cancel culture, and there's no opportunity for going to that person and saying, hey, did that sounded better in your head than it did on a tweet, and giving that individual the opportunity to flesh that out a little bit more, and maybe it's not quite so crazy or controversial. Maybe it is. Maybe it's worse than we think.
That's an interesting aspect. The aspect
I really
of
like
feedback.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I'm gonna say something a little bit controversial here. Take a devil's advocate position for a second, because I heard somebody explain cancel culture one time as like a tool of the right, that the church specifically, and Christians, that didn't like something that was happening in society or something that somebody said, and they would come out and just like cancel them. You have a problem with Duck Dynasty, we're going to boycott A&E. You don't like something with Chick-fil-A, we're going to go out and, make those changes, as like a group of Christians or the right or whatever, like, are the biggest perpetrators of cancel culture in society. And so this person's point was that their point was that it started and has roots on this sort of like public shaming, ostracizing people that fall outside of this norm. And so the left took that and adopted it and is now championing it in a large way. And I don't know, I thought that was an interesting take.
Hey, being maybe a little older here, if I could just here, I remember when Christians boycotting places took place and probably still takes place. Here's the difference. Certain organizations went to these companies and said, we don't like you supporting this, remain neutral. What you're supporting is harmful to society. We disagree with it, type thing. And when those companies just ignored them, then they boycotted. And I can think of several companies, everything from Kmart to actually Burger King, Home Depot, a little more recent, but, starting way back in the, mid 80s. But they didn't just, and there were some boycotts that were called off. In other words, when the company changed their policies and what they were doing, then they stopped boycotting them. So I don't know specifically what people were saying, but I don't think it's cancel culture. It is cancel culture, but it doesn't have the front end of they confronted, the person, the company, whatever, with the issue, gave them opportunity, and some companies change just on the basis of that.
Well, I'm gonna
There's two factors that are different there.
Tie this together just to interpret. It sounds like they're saying okay, a party had a grievance with the other party, and then they did something to that party. Both parties had an interaction. One was to cancel, boycott, ostracize, whatever you want to call it. And then there was a response, and it was what it was. And it seems like today's version of cancel culture is, I'm going to go back and find something, put it on you now, disproportionately attack that situation to cancel you for yesterday's action today. There's no forgiveness. There's nothing that you could say to come back from this. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of times, it's not even people that, okay, you didn't actually offend me. I just think that what you said was offensive to someone probably or whatever. So it's not a person, it's not an egregious, it's not one party who's being offended and an offender and then a response. This is not between two people, it's between, so maybe there's just a little bit of distinction there, and maybe a lot of that has come from the fact that we're in this digital age now, and so much more of our interactions are online than that. So anyway, Matt, sounded like you want to chime in.
Yeah, so there's a difference between it being a personal issue and an issue of actions. So if there's an issue of you have done an action and there is, I'm going to make a way that we can reconcile it, then that's fine. But if you say you are a bad person because you've done this and I want you silenced, that's a very different attack. So that's one degree that is different. And there's also generally a more rational approach. You see a measured response. You do this, I do this, there's a back and a forth. There's a dialogue that happens so that both people can be heard. When the problem with cancel culture is often that whichever party can't scream as loud or chooses not to because they think it is immoral to just, steamroll somebody. Whichever one is going to be quieter never feels like they're heard in this thing. And you can't establish an understanding between two parties. You end up with just further and further alienation instead of reconciliation. And if there's anything that the true church has been good at, it has been reconciliation, because we've got so many instances across time that prove that the real church, when they're really following the one foundation, the scriptures, they always invite reconciliation among people. It's not easy or pretty. It's very difficult, but it is something that is always encouraged because Christ died for that. So
I think we could go in pretty hard on the American church and how it's done good things in some ways, and then it's just sort of gone off into almost its own little thing. Well, I would say off the rails, but definitely, become the American church specifically.
If you study church history, you see something very similar happening. While the church was under persecution up until, until 313, so the Edict of Milan, you've got a church that was very much about reconciliation, very growing in spite of persecution. And in about 100 years from that, they started using the force of the Roman emperor to quell a problem that they were having in their church. So what happens is the church is full of people, and the more power that any organization acquires, the more likelihood there is of abusing it. So you've got to have a good definition of what abuse of power is to keep it from happening. And now, which we've got is a mob, which is growing. It's growing in power, and the worst elements of this mob are coming to power. They don't have a definition for what a proper use of power is, so they speak and they cancel something, and they speak and they cancel something that. And then what we're getting to the point is that it's about to become a mob civil war where they're canceling each other. You're starting to see that.
Well, we're in the days of the Colosseum.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no different. It's just the crowd going, give us blood,
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I think it's a power dynamic.
Eventually deteriorates to actually in Rome, it ends up being a civil war,
Yeah. But in Christianity, you don't see it when Christians are being Christians. But when Christians are part of an organization that is losing its identity in Christ and finding its identity in rituals, then you see it slipping. There's nothing wrong with rituals. There's definitely something wrong with finding your identity in them.
Right. And I think that a lot of this goes back to that power dynamic, and back to the critique that one person had, and I would say their name, but I'm not entirely sure that came from them, and I don't want to falsely attribute. But they, their larger point was that the power dynamic, that the more people on the right had the power for a long time to say what was canceled and canceling, and now the left has more cultural power to say what is canceled. And so it's sort of a swinging pendulum was I believe their larger point. And I think that, to me, regardless of how it was done, I think that it's easier to cancel someone when you have power, and the right is losing power in our society. I think that, just my opinion. And so I think that there's this like, oh, I'm being canceled, and the left has more social power. So I don't know. I just think it's more going back to that power dynamic as well. Like, you don't feel like you're in charge, you're making noise and about whatever, which was, again, her point. I was just playing devil's advocate here, that she was saying that the right's obsession, the Ben Shapiro's, all these people with their obsession with cancel culture is because they're losing power, and they're like, hey, like bucking up against that, and it's just like a flailing, and she was trying to discount it a little bit, or that person was trying to discount it a little bit. But I do think that there is some merit to the argument, I guess, with power, and because I think the right is losing a little bit of ground, so to speak. And whether that's good or bad, I think that it is both good and bad. I don't know that
there were people on the right who used unmeasured power. Just who used critical hits against their opponents to silence them. That probably did happen, but it wasn't the norm, and it wasn't something that would have been accepted if it were publicly known. What we see right now, if the tactics that had been used were used back when the right had power, there would be no left.
I'm gonna disagree with some of that.
Okay.
When you get done.
I think I was said.
Okay. So first off, Jesus didn't say, "Go ye therefore into all nations and teach them to vote Republican." He also didn't say, they will know you are mine by your love for whatever political party.
America.
I grew up in the 80s and 90s and the boycotts of various companies. And looking back, I can see the intentional acquisition of power by the right, especially by evangelicals, the intentional acquiring of political power. And I bought into that too. And looking back, I question the wisdom of that, because instead of making disciples, instead of loving people well, what that, the majority religious right, whatever you want to call it, what that became, or what the public perception of that became, was you're just trying to shove your religion down our throats. You're just trying to shove your morality down our throats. And I don't think that was ever the original intent, but because of the acquisition of power, that feeds the obsession for more power. In a lot of ways, I think the evangelical church in the States has abandoned the gospel in its seeking for political power, and that's a huge damage to our public witness.
I don't disagree entirely with you.
I gave up identifying as evangelical probably 10 or 15 years ago, when I realized, you go do a Jay Leno style man on the street, and you ask somebody what they think about evangelical, they're going to say, this set of political viewpoints, and instead of what evangelical originally was, which was, we adhere to this set of theological statements.
Well, that goes to what I was saying. So with the people that were taking power and trying to push that agenda, their power base abandoned them, because it's not what we wanted to be about. We didn't want to be about shutting people down. We wanted to be about helping our neighbors. And that's why you, me, many others abandoned that type of activism. But the problem is how are we going to convince the people who now have power that what they're doing is actually wrong? It's bullying. And I think the answer is we're not going to, but it's very likely that they will soon anyways, because of all of the infighting. It's going to become much more apparent. But then a better question, I guess, would be, how do you reach out to them and give them some grounding? Because when you think that what you're doing is right and that you're making progress in society by undercutting all of this evil, but then everybody's undercutting each other, and then you don't have any leaders, and you're like, what's going on? You don't have a good foundation for your life. Your entire worldview gets undercut. So I think a better question would be how to reach out to people once, not when, not if, but when this whole culture falls apart and they have to decide what truth is and what actual progress is. So,
well, I think we're going to have to abandon the idea of big.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
because the big is impersonal, and
a great target.
It is. It's the big invites. The big begs for straw men.
Yeah,
begs for straw men. And so this idea of, well, we have to rally everybody together and boycott this, boycott that. Maybe we made some grounds in the 80s and 90s with boycotting, but
maybe we should make better men on the street.
But yeah, it's got to be neighborhoods. It's got to be neighbors. It can't. It's. Does God do large, big revivals? Yep, he does. But the ordinary Christian life is small. The ordinary Christian life is person to person. It's deeply personal.
I resent being called small. I'm just kidding.
Well, I do too, but my weight's a little higher than yours is, so.
Fair. That's fair.
but the gospel is deeply personal, and you can't do personal at a large scale. You do personal with neighbors. Large movements happen. They have their place. God uses them. But if we want to deal with specifically with cancel culture and how do we quote unquote cancel culture and yet still leave space for objective moral truth that says, no, this is right and this is wrong. And when you're wrong, we're going to call you out on that. We're going to speak truth to power without seeking power. And I lost the thought.
Yeah, well, I just want to tie some things in here real quick. So I think, if we want to cancel culture, which, I mean, obviously we've laid out a great groundwork for how it's awful, it's bad. And I think we've even gone to say that maybe it was bad when the right did it because it was sort of more of a power grab. But I think I want to distinguish here because we talked about in the life of a Christian, how the Christian should respond to cancel culture and how I think the political right is responding to cancel culture, and maybe draw some distinctions here because I don't want it to cross. I don't like when Christianity crosses into religion. That too. But Christianity doesn't cross into politics because I think that so much on the right, and this is just something that more and more lately is just, I think the right as it stands in politics these days is very incompatible with Christianity. I think it's, and that is, there's some overlap, I guess. There's some overlap on the left with Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and, but as far as beliefs and how you can participate, in your government, I think that, I'd say my opinion is currently that the political right is just going at is responding to the loss of power in society. Whereas the left, the Christian needs to worry about it so much. I think that, all right, so I think this has been a great discussion so far, and I just kind of want to wrap it up with some final thoughts here. We covered a lot of ground and dug pretty deep, which is great. But do you have any parting thoughts or anything that we haven't talked about that was sitting on your mind? And we'll just go around, starting with, I don't know where anybody is on the panel here, but we'll go to Matt. Matt, do you have anything to add to the closing remarks on cancel culture? Anything that you want to say?
Yeah, I would say that the antidote to cancel culture is going to be just introducing empathy to our neighbors, because a lot of people don't think of it in those terms. So if somebody is talking about canceling something, or just, generally you hear a lot of people saying very mean things. I mean, just kindly emphasizing, that there's differences of opinion, but empathy is like, feeling for others is a value that most people hold in common in theory, but then they don't realize that they're not doing in practice, that they're not being very empathetic to those that they disagree with. So I'd say just pointing to that could be helpful.
Great. I agree. Dad?
Yeah, my thought is that everybody, if you talk enough, you're going to say something wrong. Mm-hmm. You're going to offend somebody. It's a part of life. I mean, I could bring up things in my past that I deserve to be canceled for. In that regard, somebody could take offense to it. Because I did them, said them. So anybody, we're all guilty. We're all sinners. We do things, say things. that are poor decisions. So it depends on, when somebody catches you. If somebody catches you at a certain moment, and should you be called out on them? Yes. Should that ruin your life? No. I just read an article today about Larry Miller, chairman of Jordan Brand, talked about committing a murder in 1965 when he's like 16 years old. He shot an 18-year-old. Lived his life, did great things, accomplished a lot of things. But some of those companies that hired him might not have kept him had somebody dug up his past and said, this guy. And so, there's a whole lot of people out there that, if you knew what they were like, you would cancel them. And even Scripture talks about it. It talks about this list of things that people did, in the past. It said, and such were some of you. That's all of us. I mean, we have done all those things. We've thought things, we've said things, we've done things. And as I say, for a Christian, the overall trajectory is a life of righteousness. We've got to be careful about how we treat people, not treating people as objects. Deal with the issues, deal with, the things that you agree with them about, but they're still human beings for whom Christ died and are redeemable. And that's where cancel culture gets it wrong.
Yeah, great. Paul, did you have any closing remarks or thoughts?
I'm probably going to piggyback off Mark and add to that, to whatever extent this is an addition. In whatever context, we will run into it. I see a lot on social media, but I'm on social media a fair amount, and I think the order of the day has to be mercy. People are going to say and do things that are outlandish and insane, and before we run off and just shut them down, bye, you're gone, we're done with you. Responding with, that may have gone better in your head than it did in the tweet or out loud. Can you, giving somebody that opportunity to just, explain themselves or, give them the opportunity to correct themselves. I have a good friend in the music industry that has found that quick repentance is a fabulous way. It's an incredible way to witness to the larger world. So instead of, oh, you said that bad word, I just said this bad word, dude, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was wrong. You shouldn't have heard that, and all that. Being quick to repent ourselves and being merciful enough to offer the opportunity for somebody to explain themselves or repent. Cancel culture, that's what we call it now. But 30 years ago, it was called boycotts. And 100 years ago, it was called something else. It's ostracization.
Revolution.
Or shunning.
Shunning.
Several hundred, shunning, shaming. Hundreds of years ago, it was called, oh, we've got a stake that we'd like to tie you to and light it up. So,
that's what we call
cancel
culture change.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But that's not the way that Jesus has called us to interact with the culture. And cancel culture, the term is going to go away and something else will replace it. When my kids are my age or when my grandkids are teenagers, there's going to be a new term come, but it's the same thing. And it's it's part of a fallen human experience. And the gospel constantly reminds us of mercy and grace. And, we're not going to get rid of cancel culture here and now. Jesus will have to come and eradicate that. But there are ways that we can respond that correct some of the view of the witness of the church, or actually correct some of the witness of the church for the last 50 years, where it's increasingly shoving a particular agenda down people's throats. And more engagement of that, it changes the perception of, oh, you're not just here to throw a political agenda around and run for power. You're willing to extend empathy, mercy, and grace, and give me an opportunity to explain myself, or to realize, wow, that was bad, and I need to go deal with that.
I agree, and I don't think that you're wrong. One thing I would say is that anytime that the church has ever tried to avoid a particular perception, it typically backfires. So the way forward is to just try to be what we're intending to be. Try harder to be like Christ. I don't know. Like try more.
It's not about try harder. It's abandon the try harder and go with loving Jesus more.
Well, yeah, loving is something that you do.
Sure. Loving Jesus more is what takes us to more mercy, more empathy, more of that hesitancy to go just chop somebody up.
But if you try to get the enemy less to respond to, they're just going to figure out some other way to contort what it is that you've done. So love Jesus more. Love your neighbor better.
Paul, you made me think, and I know John needs to try to wrap this up, but maybe the original sin that cancel culture falls under is gossip. I mean, and we can have a debate on that sometime if we disagree on that. But I was thinking it's gossip. It's gossiping. He's talking about somebody else for the purpose of harming them without giving them the opportunity to do anything.
And also self-gratification, because it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
I feel much better knowing that, though.
Well, it's been a great conversation. It's gone way different than I expected, which is great, but it has been deep, which is what I intend to do on the Jonny Random Show, is to take deep dive into conversations. I think there's a lot of things to take away from this conversation that I took away from this conversation. And I hope that you will like and subscribe any videos that come from this channel, because you are hopefully going to get a lot of deep dives into lots of topics. And we're going to try to do racism. We're going to try to do the infrastructure, all the different things that are going on in our world. We're going to have different guests in here, potentially on different days. So just stick with us, and it's been a great conversation. Thank you, everybody, for joining me.